Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, the increasing amounts of waste dumped in the countryside and how to tackle it.
Imagine that this waste just continues to increase, continues to have nowhere to go, and so it's just into the countryside or into farms. It's really dire. It could be so much more pollution.
More on that later. First, this week marks 2 years since the northern leg of the HS2 rail project to Leeds and Manchester was cancelled. Farmers whose land was compulsorily purchased say they're frustrated that they still can't buy it back. David Lumb reports from Staffordshire, where land was bought or earmarked for the line that never was.
Joy's family has farmed this land for generations, but she no longer owns it. In February 2023, she was forced to sell to make way for the northern leg of HS2. When that northern leg was cancelled 8 months later, she hoped that she could buy it back. But she says she's still no closer to knowing when or even whether she'll be able to.
At my age, I want to plan. We've had government saying all this stuff about farming, and we need to be able to be in a position where we can make some decisions. But with all this things that are still not settled and all the uncertainty, it's almost impossible to do that.
It's not just the sold land that's in limbo. Some of Joy's farm was temporarily possessed so gas pipes could be fitted.
It's been going on so long. We need some answers.
In this part of Staffordshire, there are lots of people who've faced years of upheaval for a section of the HS2 project which isn't even happening. At the Border Collie Trust in Colton, half of the field where dogs are exercised was earmarked for the northern leg of HS2. That propelled the owners to buy this replacement field for £140,000. But even though the northern leg has been cancelled, the owners still don't know where they stand.
They write back to you with a very long letter telling you all about HS2, what it is, what the background is, what the history is, and then in respect to the safeguarding that we're still waiting to hear, they just said that that was in hand, but they couldn't give us any details. There's no closure, is there? It almost feels like it hasn't been cancelled, it's been postponed.
The government says it's initiating a programme to dispose of more than 550 properties no longer required on the former HS2 eastern leg, and continues to consider its inheritance with regards to the rest of HS2 Phase 2. It says an update on future plans will be provided in due course, alongside broader plans for Northern Powerhouse Rail. But the reality is that's no good for Joy and Ben. After years of uncertainty, they could do with knowing now.
David Lumb reporting there. Party conference season continues this weekend with both Plaid Cymru and SNP meeting. We've heard from most of the major parties on their farming and rural policies over the past few weeks. We'll talk to the SNP on Monday's programme. Agricultural policy is devolved, and with elections for the Welsh Parliament in May next year, Plaid's conference, which opens later today, may well be seen as a launch for that election campaign. It describes itself as the Party for Wales and wants more independence from Westminster. I asked Anne Davis, their Rural Affairs spokesperson, about their priorities for rural Wales.
Plaid's policy is quite simple, really. It's to make sure that we have a strong and thriving agricultural sector, because without farming, really, there is no rural Wales. And it underpins the whole of our rural economy. It protects landscapes, and it just keeps the Welsh language alive and vibrant, and the culture alive as well.
Would you describe the agriculture sector as strong and thriving at the moment?
It's under pressure. I'm a dairy farmer myself. We've also got some sheep and some other animals. It's under pressure. It's under pressure for a number of reasons. SFS is one, of course, the Sustainable Farming Scheme, which is coming in next year in Wales. Our new water regulations is also putting another strain on the Welsh agricultural economy. But that's two of a lot of different issues that we're facing. But, we've been farming ourselves for over 30 years. We have peaks, we have troughs. And, the one thing about Welsh agriculture, I'll tell you, is that we're a resilient bunch of people.
Earlier this week, you voted to keep Labour's Sustainable Farming Scheme, as you just mentioned. There are, though, real concerns about the impact that will have, particularly on hill farms. Why is that the best way forward?
There's no point in going back to the drawing board, because that will only lead to another 7 years, 8 years it's taken us to get to this point of instability. The best thing to do is to make sure that the task and finish group that is being formed grasps the nettle and takes these issues and brings forward the changes that we need to have a more workable approach.
There are some issues with agriculture in Wales. For instance, with pollution, we've seen the impact on rivers like the Wye, or the whole country being designated a nitrate vulnerable zone. What can be done there?
So we're very aware of this, and we've been dealing with phosphate issues on those rivers for a long time. It needs work together,
Well, isn't that the point, that we've been dealing with phosphate issues for a long time? And many people would say something probably hard for a farming community needs to change.
It can be done, but you need to bring people with you. Probably 1% of our agricultural industry is to blame for most of this pollution. Let's deal with the 1% rather than use the stick on the 99% that comply fully with the regulations that are there now.
Anne Davis there. Right, let's talk rubbish, specifically the amount of waste which is being dumped in rural areas. All this week we're looking at rural crime, and fly tipping and waste dumping is a growing concern. Earlier this year, government figures revealed a 6% increase in fly tipping and an 8% increase in incidents involving construction waste. Well, let's focus in on an aspect which is new to me, at least. Criminals are targeting farms in the east of England to dump hundreds of tonnes of processed waste. This isn't the old mattresses and domestic rubbish associated with fly tipping, but what's called trommel waste, which is what's left after all the recyclable content from refuse has been extracted. Landowners think the processing happens in London, with drivers then emptying their lorries in the first field they can find. BBC Look East's Richard Daniel reports from the Essex-Hertfordshire border.
It stinks.
It does stink. It's foul. I mean, you smelt it when you came in the gateway, right the way up there.
On his farm at Much Haddam in Hertfordshire, Tom Streeter surveys 4 lorry loads, at least 40 tonnes, of hazardous waste, dumped in a field of lucerne, grown for horse feed.
This is trommel waste, trommel fines as they call it.
So that's from recycling, is it?
Yeah, it's usually from recycling, as there's a trommel sieve that rotates, and when they're processing the recycling and the like, this is the detritus, the debris that falls out the bottom.
Glass, metal, what appears to be the remnants of household waste. It was dumped at Much Haddam overnight last Friday. The farm had to deal with a similar incident involving similar waste just 5 months ago.
It's absolutely foul. We as the farmers are now going to have to deal with this. How feral is the countryside going to become by these sorts of things happening? We need some help. We really do need some help.
He's not alone. In June, 200 tonnes of waste was dumped on another farm near St Albans, leaving the landowner with a £40,000 clear-up bill. At Much Haddam, the proximity to the M11 is thought to be a factor. Kath Crowther is Regional Director of the CLA.
It's off the main junctions, but then somewhere where they think they won't be seen. Or they can get away with it because some of the cars passing here they wouldn't know what this is. So if Tom didn't deal with this quickly, he could be prosecuted himself. So he is victim of crime. He's had to spend all day yesterday trying to work out what on earth he's going to do with this. And then he could be prosecuted if he doesn't deal with it properly himself.
To add insult to injury, on another part of the farm, a chain was cut and builder's waste was dumped recently on a track next to the M11. The Environment Agency says it's investigating, adding that it shut down 462 illegal waste sites in England last year. But it also confirmed that 344 are still operating. Clearing the hazardous waste at Much Haddam will cost Tom Streeter £26,000, a cost he says is fast becoming unsustainable.
Does this scale of fly tipping pose an existential threat to the viability of your business?
Oh yeah, if the insurance doesn't pick up the cover of the cost on this and the rest of it, that is my profit gone for the whole year. And who's to say that I don't get more than one of these in the year? We're started this time of year as the nights draw in, that we will see more. So yeah, absolutely, of course it does.
That report from Richard Daniel. Tanya Wyatt is the lead researcher on crimes that affect the environment for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and a former professor of criminology at Northumbria University. She told me the sheer scale of this problem.
We do know that it's happening everywhere, all over the world, and it is based around profits. And we have lots of different actors involved, but it's a huge, huge problem, and we don't have enough data to actually estimate how big it actually is.
Here in the UK, it feels as though it's sort of changing from a more domestic dumping of old mattresses and so on to a much more organised crime involving, as we just heard, hundreds of tons of rubbish dumped in the countryside.
Yes, I think we do see a trend of waste crime becoming more structured, becoming more organised. And we've seen that in reports from Europol, for instance, their recent 2025 serious organised crime threat assessment. Because it's such a profitable industry, you do see much more structured, organised perpetration where you have small companies or larger companies involved and making lots of money or saving lots of money by actually collecting this rubbish and taking it out into the countryside where it's very difficult to detect. So I think that is a fair assessment that we're seeing a much more structured approach to waste crime.
How do we tackle it?
It's such a tough one because part of the problem is that it's happening in isolated and remote areas that have very little enforcement capacity. So limited resources of officers that are actually patrolling in rural or in farming communities, the cost, the human resources, the financial resources to actually do those kinds of patrols and investigations. So it has to be a real collaborative approach where we have neighborhood watch or community involvement, but more resources given to law enforcement and the Environment Agency as the authority in England, at least, to actually combat this kind of crime.
There are some changes which are included in the Crime and Policing Bill, which is currently going through the House of Lords, which would change slightly the way that this is dealt with. Bigger powers to issue guidance to local authorities, for instance, and mandatory digital waste tracking from next year. Is there anything that would make a big difference?
Transparency and tracking is good. I think it's a first step to where we can see the whole supply chain of where waste has come from. Where has the waste been produced, and then exactly where it is going. So when someone unfortunately finds it in a field, it can be determined where it has come from. So that person who has dumped it there illegally can be held responsible. That will be a good deterrent to keep criminals from doing this sorts of things. It is partly too about looking at the legal infrastructure of waste management. Are there enough facilities that have the capacity to recycle the kind of waste that's being produced in the UK? So the due diligence process about who's taking the waste could be improved as well. We see that in other places.
If nothing changes, what's the natural end point of where we're going at the minute?
Well, waste production is only increasing. There's been some World Bank studies that predict that we're going to be continuing as a global community to produce 50% more waste than we're producing now, if I remember the numbers correctly. Imagine that this waste just continues to increase, continues to have nowhere to go, and so it's just into the countryside or into farms. It's really dire. It could be so much more pollution, health hazards, public health issues, public safety issues. So it is something that really needs to be tackled to keep the environment and people healthy and safe.
Tanya Wyatt, and that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.